We'll start with creating the activity for login. Its task is chiefly to illustrate how to use layouts. In this case, we'll focus on the linear layout, which is, in fact, the simplest view. Apart from that, we'll deal with distributing controls, how to use the tools padding and margin to obtain the user interface we're interested in. I'll also show you how selectors work. It's an interesting feature which allows us to create buttons which react, for instance, the moment we press them, to get a backlight or possibly the change of the button's color. We'll also use the possibilities provided by edit text. It's a component where we can enter data, and additionally, it has some interesting options, such as hiding data in case of entering the password or displaying errors during validation. That's basically what we'll deal with in a while. Let's start with creating a new project, which we'll further develop as part of other modules. When creating a new project, we see that Android Studio remembered our domain name. We just need to enter the new application name. We'll still use Android version 4.03. We could actually try using version 2.3, but it would involve using digital libraries. I don't want to do this due to the additional complications in terms of project creation. We choose an empty activity because we want to deal with what we're interested in entirely on our own. We'll call the activity Login Activity and change its title to Login. We wait a while for the project to be built. The result is we get a very similar view to the previous one. As I've already mentioned, we'll use the linear layout. That's why we modify the relative layout, which is generated by default. In the beginning, we have a single generated text view. It doesn't fit to our project, so we remove it. We start by creating two text fields, which will store our login and password. The text fields are edit text controls. As I've already mentioned, in this case, the first thing we have to set is the view height and the width of our layout. Here, we may specify the set value in pixels. If rendering issues arise, we may change the API version from version 20, which is installed by default, to version 19. The issue with the text field is that if we set its size to 500 by 100 pixels in case of Nexus 4, it takes up over half of the screen. However, if we change the device to Nexus 7, which is larger, the field takes up less than half of the screen. That's why Google discourages us from using pixels to determine the size values. There is a far better solution, namely to use the DP or dip measure. It's a special value which is automatically scaled to the screen density. It means that regardless of which screen the control is displayed on, it will always take up more or less the same space. It's useful, particularly in case we use clickable buttons or elements. In such cases, we have to be sure that our elements will have the right size, which makes it easier to click them. The size recommended by Google is 48dp, which is the clickable size regardless of the device it is run on. Both the DIP and DP notations are correct and mean exactly the same. The DP unit is used more often because it is shorter. However, we most often use defined constants. In the earlier module, I showed you the wrap content constant. Its job is to take up only as much space as needed to store the content. Currently, we don't have any content, so the minimum value is taken. If we set any text on the text field, the component size will stretch enough to take up the needed space. If we wanted to get a component with a full screen width, it'd be better to use the match parent constant. This value means that regardless of the contents, the given component always takes up as much as its parent allows. That is, the layout, which includes it. In our case, we have a linear layout, which has values set as match parent by match parent. That is, that it will take up the full screen. Due to this, our component will adjust to the full screen width. In the case of text fields, the width is often set as match parent and the height as wrap content. We already have the first edit text. Now we can add another one. We get a warning now. It's a notification that we're trying to set the default horizontal orientation, simultaneously trying to insert two components which try to take up its full width. This means that the components will be placed next to one another, so given that they both want to occupy the full width, only the first one will be placed there, whereas the second one will land outside the screen. The simplest solution is to use the vertical orientation. It causes the components to be displayed one under the other. Now, we just need to add a button. Here, we'll also set the width to match parent and height to wrap content. We can also set the text which will be displayed in the button. When entering the button text, we get another prompt. Inside Android Studio, Link is launched. It's a tool supplied together with Android, which tries to analyze the code we write and find potential errors there. In our case, Link determined that we try to use ordinary text in a place where we could use a string. We get information that we should use a resource. As before, we can use the Alt-Enter shortcut to see the default solution to the problem. It is separating the text we want to insert to the resource and changing our text into a reference to a resource. It boils down to specifying the name under which our text will be hidden inside the resources. The resource is created automatically, and we get a reference to it. We can see our strings XML file, where we can find a new login field, which includes our translation. An additional warning we may see is that our text fields do not inform the user about the data we expect. Therefore, I can specify the type of accepted data, possibly a prompt displayed the moment no data is displayed yet. In our case, we'll use a prompt. When entering the text, link suggests that we're trying to use a text instead of resources. Moreover, in case of the text field used for the password, it's good to specify the input type in order to obtain automatic password hiding when entering it. Setting input type to text password causes the entered text to be treated as a password, so it won't be displayed.